Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen Paw, and I'm the managing editor at CBR.com.
And I'm Ben Kendrick, the publisher of ScreenRant.com.
And together, we are The First Rule. This is a podcast where we go through all of our social media channels and read the comments for some reason. Join us on our mission.
Okay, so yeah, we'll start out with Power Rangers. There's not a lot of details to this story yet, but we found out today that Jonathan Entwistle, who is in charge of the Power Rangers reboot, his role has now been extended to create a Power Rangers shared universe between the movie that he's making, and they'd say the movies, as well as the TV series. So previously the Power Rangers, I think they're on season 28 or something right now with this upcoming Dino. It's like Dino whatever. I'm spacing what it's called.
No, that's actually what it's called. It's called Dino
Yeah,
Whatever.
yeah, Dino
We just kind
whatever.
of ran out. There's
Yeah,
just like ellipses, Dino
that's
Whatever.
it.
Just get out there.
Dino Fury, Power Rangers Dino Fury, the 28th season of the American version of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Um, it's kind of unclear whether or not that's actually tying in, or this sort of movie and shared universe franchise will ultimately kind of kick off a new phase in the Power Rangers. But what I was kind of saying previously is this 28th season, they've all been tied together, right? They've never brought the more recent reboot in, but the old movies were kind of tied into the TV series. And then, characters from the previous seasons of the Power Rangers have shown up on more recent seasons. They've done, some of their mega crossovers and stuff like that. So the idea of a shared universe isn't entirely new to this franchise, but I am curious, kind of how audiences are going to respond to the idea now. Going into the comments of our article at Screen Rant about it, there's a lot of different kind of points that the readers have been making, but one of the main ones that came up was like, are the Power Rangers too cheesy now for modern audiences to take a shared universe seriously? So Paul Smotherman said, "Why? These are so bad and cheesy. They always have been. Maybe that flies in Japan and other Asian countries, but it's worse than watching B Godzilla movies from the 70s."
Look,
Yeah.
maybe some of that shit flies in Japan, okay, but not
Yeah,
here in USA.
we take our superheroes and our TV shows very, very seriously here in the US. Hadros sent Yawanto, who I think we mentioned a comment from last week, according to our producer, Greg, in traditional fashion from this gentleman, replied with a very, very polite and intelligent reply. And he said, replying to Paul, he said, "Well, in the original Super Sentai series that was later adapted on the Power Rangers series, things have not always been cheesy. The Sentai series was actually rather dark. They would let children die from monster attacks." And he goes on and kind of talks more about the history of that series, and tying and bringing the point kind of home. David Volkmer said, if they do a dark universe like that short skit they did a few years ago, then that would be extremely interesting. And they're obviously talking about the short, where the Power Rangers were murdering each other, and it was like a future post-apocalyptic future with the Megazord rising up to fight Goldar and stuff like that. So I am curious, Steve, what you think of this whole thing, because when I'm thinking about a new Power Rangers movie, I'm thinking something like the 2017 movie, except better. I may have reviewed that movie, or at least we talked about it on the Screen Rant podcast a while back, and I remember that being one of the lamest things about that movie was that you didn't even see the Megazord form. They all just kind of fell into a volcano and then came out as the Megazord and stuff. So there were these moments of kind of fan service that were really missing from that movie. And and sort of the modern aesthetic was cool, but they didn't make it all sort of come together the way you sort of would from, I think, you expect to see the formation of the Megazord, and you expect to see kind of these different things, and that movie didn't quite do that. A movie like that manages to do everything it's supposed to, I think, is kind of could have done sort of well. But I am curious then how you tie a movie like that it kind of hit most of the points, but then you put that in the same shared universe as the television series, which is much cheesier. And if you're building a shared universe, like these shared universes, they fail left and right. So, like, it needs to be something really special, like Marvel or, some of these like Star Wars or whatever. Like, I don't know that you can get away with kind of a cheesy TV show and then like try and make a big blockbuster movie that will appeal to people that's a very different tone. But I'm curious, I mean, I'm sure you're a Power Rangers fan like myself. I'm kind of curious like what you would want to see, and if you think that like, Power Rangers as like a big shared universe entity sort of had its time like back when we were in high school basically.
No, and I'll say exactly why. It's because of the comics that are going on right now. And if anybody has read the comics out there, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read the comics, then you should read them, because what they've done at Boom Studios, and they've just released this, I think, over the last couple of years, and it might have been at least in some way inspired by that that one fan film where dudes are just using Uzis. They like use morphin grids and they just
Yeah.
become guns and they just start like lighting each other up. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, but Shattered Grid is what of our readers have been talking about a lot. And Shattered Grid is the name of the story arc in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comics, which is super dark. It's about Tommy, the Green Ranger, coming back and kind of combining the White Ranger and Green Ranger power coins and then taking over the multiverse of Power Rangers. So he becomes a bad guy again and just straight murders a bunch of Power Rangers across the different multiverse. Like the things that you mentioned, all of the different shows, they
Yeah.
do exist kind of in the same, I guess, universe, but also there are other multiversal things going on. And he just tries to conquer the entire grid, and it is the Power Grid, the Morphin Power Grid, and it is one of the coolest stories. So if they use that as like the template for this movie, that would be mwah, 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 mwah. Like I will morph into just a walking chef's kiss. That is my Zord. And I would love that. I think they can probably forego this, the movie in 2017 that they came out. I think it was fine. I think it was all right. It did the thing well, but I don't think they need to do that. Like they have, the comics have really cool costumes. They're not too Iron Man-y, which is what a lot of people were complaining about with 2017
Yeah,
film.
yeah, for sure.
And like they just look sleek and cool. And that story would, I think, hit a lot of the fan service that you mentioned, but also grow it up in a way that is extremely cool. I just want to mention some of our comments too here on our Facebook page. Ken Kennedy, when we said, "Oh yeah, there's going to be a shared universe," goes like Transformers and GI Joe.
Yeah.
um, so there's that. Someone else mentioned the Shattered Grid. JD said the Shattered Grid is the only crossover we need. I agree with that, JD. And then Brian Thibault says Hollywood is out of original ideas, which I think is kind of ironic because the whole Super Sentai thing that exists in Japan was literally ripped and taken over and turned into its own show, which is now
Yeah.
on its 28th season, as you mentioned. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different opinions about all of this going into it, but I think most people are excited about it, and more people than I thought were excited about
Yeah.
that 2017 movie. I'm not sure
Yeah, I
about
would.
if your readers thought that too.
That's true. Like, so I have this memory of going and seeing that movie and being extremely disappointed. But I think part of it's because what I was saying, the end of the movie like misses kind of these key Power Rangers sort of epic moments that you would expect from a Power Rangers movie. And it's like those little sort of holes were kind of what I think left sort of a bad taste in people's mouths. I'm sure there are going to be listeners and viewers that are going to disagree with us and say that movie was total garbage, but I mean, we're talking about the Power Rangers here, right? Like none of the actual live action stuff has been like epic in the way that a big blockbuster movie would need to be these days. I think probably the closest to that was, the 96, 97, it must have been
Oh
97 or
God,
something like that.
yeah,
Like film, with that it starred the original cast and stuff like that. Um, I don't know like that you can say like, oh, Power Rangers is this franchise that on face value, like I would have expected anything different from the movie that we got in 2017. I love the idea that you're talking about with Shattered Grid. I've read some of those comics and I agree that's like a great it's like a great it's like almost like the alt story that you would expect from like kind of like a like Superman Red Sun or something like that, right? But
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
my I'm curious, like, if they do this, if they're going to try and reboot the whole thing again. So, like, new Rangers, and I think that may have actually been one of kind of the pitfalls of the 2017 movie is like, most people get it at this point, right? There's 5 Rangers and they each, like, have a power coin and they morph into these things and they control these, giant robots that form together. And so I'd almost rather they do something kind of like Shattered Grid where they're just like, look, the deal, and here's this guy from the past, even if it isn't, specifically the Green Ranger or something like that, and it's just here's a corrupt Power Ranger or something like that. They're coming back, which I guess is kind of like what the actually 2017 movie is, now that I'm thinking about it, because wasn't
It
Rita like a
is.
Power Ranger in that movie, like
That is
a
correct. Yeah,
yeah,
she was the
so
Green Ranger, I think. Yeah.
that's right. So anyway, but not like that. The more I'm talking about this, the more maybe it needs to be the Green Ranger. But like, I don't want them to like bog themselves down and having to reteach everybody the story. It's kind of like Spider-Man Homecoming and, even some of the Marvel movies and even some of the DC movies like lately. It's like we kind of don't even need these origins of these characters all the time anymore.
Yeah.
People are familiar with them. Bring them in, tell a good story, tell a story that's unexpected, like you're talking about with Shattered Grid, and like find some real tethers to the mythology. I think that could be really cool. I am curious how it exists within the confines of the television series as they stand now, just because those are lower production budgets and kind of cheesy and stuff. But I'm I'm open to it. I think if anything deserves a shared universe, like deserves might be a strong word, but there's a shared universe that I'd be willing to have burst into the universe. Like the Power Rangers is one that makes sense to me, given that they've already kind of done it in the past.
Yeah.
So
I
uh,
completely agree, and I think they could set something up. They could just abandon Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Dino, whatever, and just go into a new thing that introduces it, spread it out over a series, get that on HBO Max, get just the worst stuff. They're doing drugs, they've got
mhm.
guns, God knows, they've all just fallen by the wayside, who knows? And then you set up the movie, and then that's where like the meat and potatoes of this
Yeah,
thing happens. And I
that's
think I'm down with that as well, man. I'm 100% behind that kind of thing.
I've always wanted to see like the Dark Universe movie into a real movie. Like that short was so cool with them running on the ground with the guns and like Megazord stomping over them, and like, oh, it was just so epic and sick that,
Yeah.
like, I know that's kind of his thing and everything. So like I understand we couldn't see it quite like that, but that's like I want that. And it worries me if it's tethered to the TV series, because like that requires like a big budget, dark, kind of gritty, people aren't going to like this, but it's almost like Michael Bay in terms of its action. Like that's the expectation. I don't know if you can do that if you tie it to the TV series, but we'll see. Maybe they'll have a different thing. I will say though that my comment of the week, I want to bring these comments of the week back. My comment of the week was in the comments of this, and it's from Jacob Sane, who said, "This news is like one of Screen Rant's April 1st articles," which is 100% true. This is the kind of thing we would write as an April Fool's Day post for sure. But it's real.
Yeah, yeah, and let's celebrate it. Come on,
Yeah,
sane. Let's do
that's it.
this.
That's
Yeah.
it.